And I'm sorry, I just started the recording and I saw we had some people that just joined as well. So just in summation, we have Ingrid Kundinger here from the Senior Medicare Patrol, and they do a lot of great work around fraud prevention and education, outreach. They have all kinds of resources. And one of those resources you mentioned is your helpline. So I'm really curious about what the most common scam you're seeing is right now on the helpline.
Great question. Right now, the most common call that we're getting, or the most frequent call, is that people are calling from all across the state regarding calls that they're receiving about new Medicare cards. So the first thing that I want to just put out there is that there is not a new Medicare card. It's not plastic, it's not laminated, it's not a different color, it doesn't have a chip code or a chip reader in it. It doesn't need to have your doctor's name on it. There's not a new Medicare card. So the red, white, and blue paper kind of plain card that you have from Medicare is the only card. And right now we're hearing a lot of people, not just here in Wisconsin, but from our colleagues across the country, that this is something that the fraudsters have been successful at doing. And so they're going to keep doing it. So people are getting phone calls saying, hey, did you get your new Medicare card? And for someone who isn't sure, that can be a little bit scary. I mean, wait a minute, I didn't know there was a new Medicare card. No, I didn't get anything. And so then the fraudster is going to pick up on that and think, oh, I can maybe get some information from this person. And so, the phone call continues. People don't want to be without the most up-to-date information, especially as it relates to their health insurance. And so oftentimes the fraudsters can be very convincing and convincing people that, you do need to share this. And I just need to verify. That seems to be one of the buzzwords that we often hear, is that they need to verify that Medicare information and they'll be sure to get something sent to them. So that, that's just something, again, it goes back to Medicare-related scam and fraud prevention, but really any sort of fraud prevention in general is just to really be cautious, especially on the telephone. When someone calls you out of the blue that you aren't expecting, that you've never talked to before, that you're not familiar with from a company standpoint, our best practice or our suggestion is always for folks to really not share their personal information over the phone. Personal information meaning a Medicare number, social security number, bank account information, credit card information. You'd be surprised. The fraudsters, they'll ask you for all sorts of stuff. And the more information you're willing to share, the more dangerous that they can be. And so we're just really encouraging people to, protect their personal information. And one important thing too, as it relates to the new Medicare card scam, is that oftentimes the callers are identifying themselves as calling from Medicare or on behalf of Medicare. And what I think is really important for people to remember or to understand is that Medicare is 99.9% of the time never going to initiate a phone call to you. They would only initiate a phone call to you if you had first initiated a phone call to them and needed some follow-up or some additional information. And if they weren't able to address that while you were on the phone with them, they may ask for your permission to call you back with that updated information. So just out of the blue, when someone calls saying they're calling on behalf of Medicare, that's a red flag. And my suggestion would always be for folks to hang up, to say as little as possible to that person on the phone and remove yourself from that phone call as soon as possible. And sometimes people think, well, boy, maybe Medicare was trying to call me. If that's you, my suggestion would be to flip over your Medicare card and look for that toll-free number to Medicare, where you can initiate that call yourself to ask if there was a phone call made to you about your Medicare benefits. That way you know that that information is going to be safe.
Yeah, that's all super helpful. And I think especially when we talk about those phone scams, the number of variations we see on those is just astounding. Mm-hmm. And it's so hard because you can't trust your caller ID anymore. It might say it's Medicare, but they're just spoofing that. And so we see that in a lot of different kinds of scams. So I'm glad you mentioned specifically the phone. So that's the kind of the most common one you see, is people calling and saying, verify your information so we can send you a new card. What other scams are you hearing about or seeing in Wisconsin?
Sure. So the second most popular fraud scheme that we hear about on a regular basis is related to durable medical equipment. And when I say durable medical equipment, I'm referring to back braces, knee braces, ankle braces, any sort of body part that might be able to have a brace, that sort of thing, as well as diabetic supplies in some circumstances, and CPAP machines and other medical devices. But this is a pretty prevalent type of fraud as well. Again, oftentimes it happens via the telephone. Someone will call and say, start asking questions and, hey, are you experiencing any sort of pain? And usually they'll start with back pain. That seems to be pretty prevalent. And on any given day, most people may have either currently been dealing with back pain or some sort of pain, or have in the recent past. And so, people are quick to say, I have been having some back pain. And so that's great. They've got this great piece of equipment for you. It's going to be free. Medicare is going to cover the cost of all of those things. Just need to verify. Here we go again. Just need to verify that Medicare information, and we'll be sure to get that information sent to you, or that equipment sent to you, so that you can get some relief from your back pain or knee or whatever you landed on as the jackpot, so to speak. So a couple of things about that. The first thing I want to make sure that people understand is that Medicare does cover the cost of that sort of thing. However, Medicare does require that there is an order that's written by the physician that you are in the care of. So it can't just be someone randomly writing you a prescription for that sort of equipment. It needs to be someone that you have seen, that you have developed a relationship with. And there's a different schedule depending on what type of equipment you need as to how often Medicare will cover that or replace it and that sort of thing. So that's important to know. If you do have back pain or any sort of pain that you think might be helped by this sort of equipment, by all means, our suggestion is always for folks to reach out to their healthcare provider and ask those questions. We certainly want people to know that these things can be helpful. We just want to make sure that people get them in the correct way. So not answering information from an out of the blue phone call, but actually talking to your healthcare provider. So what happens then is that they called me. I said, yeah, my back has been feeling kind of funny. It's not going to cost me anything. Medicare is going to cover it. Why not? So I run off to wherever it is I keep my Medicare information, share that information with the person on the phone. And then a couple days or weeks later, I may or may not receive from this company that piece of equipment that we spoke of on the phone. In some cases, for the folks that I've talked to, they've received just the back brace that they talked about on the phone with this person. In other cases, people have received up to 7 boxes of different types of medical equipment. So in addition to that back brace, they threw in a knee brace for both knees, some ankle, all the things. So then you're stuck with a bunch of things you didn't want, you didn't need. More than likely is not probably the highest quality of equipment. And when your Medicare statements catch up with you in a couple of months, you'll notice, because you're all going to look at those statements and be good healthcare consumers and pay attention to those things, you're going to notice that Medicare probably made payment on a lot of those things. And I've seen a lot of Medicare summary notices from folks. I first thought $60 billion, that seems a little bit excessive, but then started to see Medicare summary notices where, in the instance of the gentleman who received 7 boxes of equipment, the charges for that were in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. Now, we could debate all day about whether that pricing structure is accurate. That's not the point. They should have never been billing Medicare for that in the first place. And so contacting the Senior Medicare Patrol, we can get involved with that. While we are not investigators per se, we do collect information. So if you open your Medicare summary notice and you see that there are claims on there for things that didn't happen to you in the clinic, or that weren't provided to you, or that just don't seem right, give us a call. We'll talk about how we can get that submitted to the Office of Inspector General for investigation. And we've been successful in doing that. Sometimes people will call and say, oh, I just did something stupid. I shared my Medicare information. Now what's going to happen? And so we can talk through the different steps to make sure that their Medicare information is protected, and then some things to watch out for. And a lot of that time is, you know, if you're not expecting any packages, just be cautious. Don't just randomly accept things, or if there's a package that's delivered to your home and you weren't expecting it, you know, check the return address label before you open that. If it's from someone that you aren't sure who that is, we suggest, you know, just return to sender, don't open it. Then you don't have to deal with having that in your possession and trying to figure out how to get it back to them. So, you know, that's probably the second most frequent call that we get as it relates to the durable medical equipment. And sometimes it starts with the new Medicare card scam. And then once you verify that information, then the fraudsters think, okay, great. So we've got this, but now we need to be able to give them something so that we can submit a claim to Medicare. So oftentimes people report to us that they're then transferred to someone within that company who's going to talk to them about some sort of brace. So again, best practice just to not share that information. And again, if you think that you could benefit from something like that, talk directly with your healthcare provider. I know there's also television commercials that talk about these things. Sometimes late at night, they're probably thinking that people are lying awake, tossing and turning, not able to sleep because of some sort of pain. So that's a great time to put those commercials on TV when you're thinking, oh, I got to do something about this. And so our suggestion again would be to skip the toll-free number on the telephone, because it's going to probably get you into a whole loop of things that could cause all sorts of troubles, and try to make it through the night and call your doctor in the morning to get some more one-on-one support for that sort of an issue.
Yeah. And those durable medical equipment kinds of things are also scary because, you know, if you actually need a brace that's going to work for you, but you've already kind of filed had this claim filed for you, who knows if you can get the one you need. So I mean, obviously all of these scams are absolutely terrible and tragic, but it's just so unfortunate that people then can't get what they actually need sometimes because of these instances. So I know we had a couple more people join. Just want to remind everyone I'm recording the session and you'll get the recording after. And if you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box or Q&A and we'll get to those as we go. Ingrid, you briefly kind of mentioned how we're all going to be great consumers and look at those statements. So what about those statements? Like, why are they important? What's on there? What should people know about those statements from Medicare?
Yep, absolutely. So if someone is traditional Medicare, so parts A and B directly from Medicare, you would receive on a quarterly basis a statement that's called a Medicare summary notice. So this statement is going to provide an overview of all the claims that were filed by all the different providers during that 3-month window of time. So it's important for you to open those upon receipt. Oftentimes we hear people, oh yeah, I get those. I put them in a box under my bed. I've never looked at them. I would encourage you to look at them. I know that they can be a little bit overwhelming. Initially, there's a lot of pages and a lot of parts, but it's really important to look at that just to make sure that everything that is listed on there is actually something that happened to you, that's an accurate reflection or picture of your healthcare by the healthcare team that you're familiar with. So for instance, if you are living in Wisconsin and you receive your Medicare summary notice and you open it and there's a bunch of things there from, let's say, Texas, and you've never been to Texas, or you haven't been to Texas during the 3-month time period that this Medicare summary notice is providing overview for, that would be a red flag that either there was some mistakes in coding, or someone's Medicare information got typed into the system wrong, or that someone is attempting to use that information for payment fraudulently from Medicare. So I always tell people, if they're hesitant, they can give us a call. We can kind of walk through the important parts of that statement so that you're familiar with it, so that it doesn't become overwhelming to you and that you just get into a routine of looking at that. If someone has a Medicare Advantage plan, or for their Part D prescription drug plan, you would receive what's called an explanation of benefits statement. So again, that's going to come and provide an overview, another way for you to make sure that the things are on there that are accurate. And we also provide what we call a My Healthcare Tracker, which is a resource that the Senior Medicare Patrol has available. It's kind of just a small notebook type resource. You could stick it in your purse or your back pocket. And the intended use for that is if you don't have a system in place or you're looking for something, that you could take that with you anytime you went to see your healthcare provider, so that either during that appointment or quickly after, you could just jot down kind of the highlights from that doctor's visit. So maybe you put down that you saw Dr. Smith on May 11th of 2022, and you had some lab work done and some x-rays. Again, you don't need to go into detail. They give you plenty of paperwork, your after visit summaries at the clinic. So this would just be a way then that maybe your Medicare summary notice isn't going to arrive in the mail to you for a couple of months. This would be something then that you, when you received that statement, you could grab your healthcare tracker as well and kind of cross-reference so that you've got dates of who you saw, what you did, what happened there, so that when you're looking at that statement, you can match up May 11th, Dr. Smith, x-rays. Granted, it might have some other medical jargon on there that doesn't plainly state x-rays, but or lab work, but then you know, yep, this was billed appropriately. This is an appropriate claim. I remember that I did have this appointment, and then you can rest easy knowing that for at least that snapshot in time, your information is safe and everything is accurate.
Wow, that's I feel like every answer is so full of information and resources, and it's just amazing the amount of information that you guys provide. And I know you mentioned like checking them regularly. I just want to add that if you are supposed to be getting a statement and you don't, that's also a red flag. So yeah, make sure you're receiving them and that please open them and look at them. So we've talked about statements and kind of being wary of caller ID and just hanging up if you get unsolicited calls. There's a lot of tips, but what would you say is the most important thing people can do to protect themselves from Medicare fraud?
I would say the most important thing people can do is to keep their information to themselves and to not share that information over the phone. We've talked about that already. Just really being adamant. And oftentimes people will call the helpline and they say, you're never going to believe what I just did. I knew better. I knew that I should never share that information, but there was just something that caller said, or maybe they caught you on a bad day, or you just woke up from a nap. I mean, I've heard all those things and I certainly understand that, but we all just need to band together and really just keep that information to ourselves, because if they don't have it, there's nothing they can do. If you don't share your Medicare number with them, they can't submit faulty claims to Medicare. If you don't share your Social Security number with them, they can't kind of attempt to take your identity and submit or complete credit card applications or loan applications. So the less information they have out there, the better. And I know, they're good at what they do. I mean, just Medicare alone, $60 billion, that doesn't take into account any of the other scams. And we all know that the list for that is pages and pages and pages. And, oftentimes when we are out talking to people, as I'm sure is the case with you as well, we hear even more new scams that we've never even heard of that people are getting. So just really important, Medicare-related and in general, for people to just realize that while the phone is great and we rely on it and we need it to talk to our friends and family, it can be really dangerous. And so we just really need to remind ourselves, remind our friends and family, check in on people. And it's important to report those things too. We keep track of that. Sometimes we'll encourage people to contact the Federal Trade Commission, perhaps reach out to the AARP fraud network, depending on what. So it's just really important to know that there are resources available and help is there, and to call them, because we do keep track of that and we submit reports so that they can see kind of what's happening in different parts of the state. So keep your information to yourself and then do share when you get those sorts of calls.
Always a great tip to just hang up on people and don't tell them anything. Yes.
I know it seems rude, but I mean, think of what those folks are doing on the phone to you. I think that's way more invasive than you just simply hanging up the phone. And, you know, unfortunately, they're going to call and call and call and call and call. And so we encourage people to just, if they can, if they've got access to caller ID or their, you know, their smartphone tells them who it is, just to not even interact, because eventually, and eventually might be 6 months or 6 years, eventually they're going to stop calling that phone number, because if you don't ever answer it, they may think that it's just no longer a valid phone number. But if you answer it or you say something, then they know that they were close, and they're probably going to keep trying. And it does get to be a lot for folks.
It definitely does. And I'm glad that you mentioned too that these people are criminals. And so first of all, we don't owe them anything. You don't have to answer the phone. You don't have to be nice and listen to them. Just hang up. And they're professionals. Like, this is their job. They're really, really good at what they do. And the reporting is so important. And also, I know, so difficult sometimes, because people feel this sense of shame and disappointment with themselves. And I just want to reiterate, these people are criminals and professionals, and like, it's no fault of your own or people. If you know people that this has happened to, it's no shortfalling on their part, and reporting is really critical so that we can, like you said, gather as much information as we can and then do what we can to stop these people. So thank you so much for that. I know there's already one question in the chat, but I do just want to remind everyone, drop your questions there if you have something you would like answered publicly. If there's not, we'll, like I said, we'll be sending a follow-up email, and you'll get SMP's contact information if you want to follow up on something maybe that's more confidential for you. But Ingrid, I see in the chat, somebody is asking the Senior Medicare Patrol helpline number.
Sure. So our toll-free number, and I can put it in the chat too, is 888-818-2611.
Perfect. And I just dropped that in there as well. So, you know, for those of you who might have come in later, the helpline is a great resource. They can connect you with who you might need to be connected with. They can answer your questions, talk you through kind of those explanation of benefits. So I definitely recommend reaching out to them. And somebody else is asking for the phone number to the Inspector General. Do you happen to know that, Ingrid?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can certainly look that up, and maybe that would be something you could include in the follow-up notes.
Follow-up email. Yes.
So I can for that. Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. I'm going to write that down to make sure it ends up in the email. While people are maybe thinking of more questions or typing it in the chat box, I have a couple more questions for you, Ingrid.
Sure.
We talked a lot about what SMP does and all these great resources, and I know we're going to send stuff to people, but do you guys have like a website? Like, can they follow you on social media? Like, where's the best place for people to go to get information?
Sure, absolutely. We do have a website, and that website address is smpwi.org. And so there's a lot of different information on that website that about our mission, about protecting yourself, different stories about fraud, as well as access to resources. We do publish a quarterly newsletter, the SMP Scoop. And so that is a publication that is provides information about Medicare-related fraud, but also fraud in general. There's always information from the Social Security Administration, the Better Business Bureau, other agencies that, you know, do similar work and provide similar resources to older people. And so that's a resource. And then we also have a Facebook page. That's Wisconsin Senior Medicare Patrol. And so we try to provide information on our Facebook page as well that makes it easy for you to see and perhaps share with friends and family as it relates to news fraud or scams that we're hearing about, or for people to just remind themselves, hey, don't share your information, just important reminders and that sort of thing. So those are probably the best ways. If you don't have access to those things, you can always call our toll-free helpline, and we can get you, send information to you as well. I should say that our newsletter is available either in print copy or electronically, so you can decide what works best for you. And if that's something that you're interested in subscribing to, you can either call the toll-free helpline or request that information, or request to be added to that list on our website.
Awesome. Ingrid, I have just a couple more questions, but I'm going to come to you, Tom, in just a couple of minutes. So heads up, you're on deck. One question, I know we've kind of talked about prevention and things like that, but say I did give somebody my Medicare number, what is my first step if that happens?
Absolutely. Well, first I would say, and this is similar to what you said before, like, don't be too hard on yourself. It happens. The fraudsters, like you said, are criminals. They're professionals. This is their job. And so no shame in that from your standpoint. And then I would say to call someone and tell them. And you can certainly call the Senior Medicare Patrol. I get a lot of those phone calls, and I'm going to provide some suggestions to you. I'm going to encourage you to call Medicare directly and report that your Medicare number is compromised. They are able to then look into your account. They would be able to see if any sort of claims have been submitted within a relatively short amount of time, to see if someone, the person that you shared that information with, is already using that or attempting to use that. The good news with that is that when Medicare changed the format of their Medicare numbers a number of years ago, it used to be a person's social security number, and now it's a randomly generated alphanumeric number that if there is evidence that your Medicare card is being used fraudulently, they can send you a new one. So that's great. I mean, it causes a little hassle on your end, because then you need to make sure that the appropriate healthcare team that should have your updated information has that, so that they don't have any issues with submitting fraudulent claims, or submitting claims that are not fraudulent, but that the fraudsters who have your old information wouldn't be able to use that anymore. So I'm always going to encourage people to report that to Medicare. I'm also then going to encourage people to just be cautious of any unsuspected or unexpected packages that come, because oftentimes it's going to be a box or numerous boxes of all kinds of medical supplies. And usually the return address label is going to say something about some sort of medical supply company, XYZ medical supply company, more than likely from somewhere outside of the state of Wisconsin. Usually they're coming from the Carolinas or Florida or California. So if there's anything suspicious that way, just don't even get involved with that. Return it, refuse acceptance. And then the third thing I always encourage people to do is to really be extra vigilant about checking their statements. So just in the next cycle or two of statements, just be extra cautious, knowing that someone did have access to your Medicare information, just to make sure that they haven't used that and filed claims to Medicare.
Awesome. Sorry, my final question then is, this is a great program. You guys do stuff all over the state. I know for AARP, we do a lot with volunteers, and I'm sure SMP is similar. So if people are listening in and they're thinking, wow, Medicare fraud is terrible, I want to help combat this, how can they get involved with what you do?
Absolutely. Our SMP program is very much funded or founded on volunteers. It was started that way in the mid-1990s and continues to be that way today. And so we're always looking for volunteers who are willing to help us share this mission and help educate folks, friends and family, neighbors, whomever, about Medicare fraud and how people can protect themselves from that. So we have information available on our website about volunteer opportunities that you could check out. You could also give us a call on the toll-free helpline and we can talk through that with you. Our volunteer opportunities currently would be to, if you're someone who's interested in doing presentations, we're always looking for people to help us do that. If you're someone who wants to help us staff tables and booths at different community events, help us distribute information and make sure that maybe at the library or at the meal site in your community or senior center that our information is available there. And then we're also going to be starting to involve volunteers in some of our helpline calls. So if that's something that you think might be of interest to you, talking directly with Medicare beneficiaries or family members who have concerns that maybe they've been impacted by Medicare-related fraud, we're going to be starting some training for that really soon as well. So we'd love to have you join us if you're interested.
Awesome. I know we're running a little bit over time, but I do want to invite one of our volunteers, Tom Bolton. He's a volunteer with the AARP Fraud Watch Network. And Tom, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about what the AARP Fraud Watch Network is and kind of how you're involved with that as a volunteer.
Yeah, so I have been involved with it for about 5 years now. And I have done lots of presentations to different groups about the AARP Fraud Watch Network. But it's available online. And the first thing I want to tell people about the Fraud Watch Network is it's just loaded with information, articles, maps, databases of where things are happening, lots of examples. There's a wonderful podcast there. And it's free. It's free to sign up for it. And we always caution people to be leery of things that are free, right? If somebody says it's free, that's cautious. This really is free. You can get most of the information even if you're not signed up as a member of it. But it's open to people of all ages, not just those over 50. Because the fact of the matter is, young people are often targets of fraud. And we want to get them involved in helping prevent fraud right from the start. One of the nice things about the Fraud Watch Network is it really teaches you the techniques and the approaches that the fraudsters use. So not just individual scams that are going on right at this time, but the scams are always changing. And so understanding how these fraudsters do their business is really helpful. And you'll learn that through these resources. If you sign up, you'll get a couple of emails per month. And they're good information targeted to what's happening in your area right at the current time. So that's a real plus. Again, you can sign up and you can be any age. The website is aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. And I put that in the comments earlier so you can see it there. And again, you'll see articles, maps. The maps are kind of helpful at looking at what's happening in what's been reported, at least in your neighborhood, in your area, what's going on. I think a lot of the examples are really, really helpful. There's a helpline, and the resources, the individuals at the helpline will help guide you through what to do in terms of reporting it. The number, and I put this on the chat box too, it's 877-908-3360. They're very helpful. Depending on what the incident is, sometimes more helpful than others, but they'll help guide you on who to report things to and what actions you can take. And I spent a lot of time with somebody on a really interesting We Energy fraud that was going on in the Milwaukee area, and they were not aware of it and took a lot of action to share that with appropriate people. So that was a really helpful contact. We also have an online support group now for those who have been victimized. And I'm not as familiar with that, but that's a great opportunity to get help for following up, because the effects of having your identity stolen or other fraud perpetrated on you, they can last for a long time. And it's really helpful to have a support group to help you with that. And again, we have volunteers that will do presentations for your group. I've done it for a lot of senior groups, for library groups, and we just share a lot of things. I like to use what's called the fraudster's playbook, and I really emphasize what are the techniques that they use, as well as giving information about the fraud network in general. Again, I can't overemphasize how good the materials are, and you'll learn a lot by reading this and checking it out regularly. So that's my main thing to say about it.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Tom, and thank you for all that you do with the Fraud Watch Network. Yeah, it's really important work, and we always like to refer people to the Senior Medicare Patrol when Medicare fraud comes up, because they're the experts. So Ingrid, I will toss it back to you real quick if you have any closing comments you'd like to make.
Sure. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for the good work that you and your team do to help keep people safe. Hopefully the folks that are participating today or watching this in the future just now know that there's yet another resource available to them, the Senior Medicare Patrol, to help them keep themselves safe from Medicare-related fraud. And we're here to help in any way that we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, everyone who joined today. This was the first webinar in a series we'll be doing. So next month, we'll be talking with Michelle Reinen from the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection about imposter scams. So I'm sure Medicare will come up, and also gift cards and how those kind of factor into a lot of different scams. So I'll include information about that event in the follow-up email, along with the recording and resources. And we could talk about this for hours, and I'm sorry we have to kind of cut it short today, but thanks so much for all the great information, and thanks everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your day.